All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Cochran, and I work in the Marketing and Communications Department here at University of Western States. In addition, I have the privilege of being in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. I'm joined today with Program Director, Dr. Michelle Cox, and Assistant Professor, Dr. Amy Ohana. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for doing this, Erin.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. With that, we're just going to jump right into some questions that we have. Take it away, Dr. Cox.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that you were able to facilitate putting this interview together. I asked you and I emailed you, can we hype up the fact that Dr. Ohana is coming? She's so fabulous. Our current students know her a little bit, at least those who've gotten to take her courses, because she has been adjuncting for us for a couple of terms now. I think a lot of our potential applicants and our students are always interested in the stories of how we got there. Sure. They all have those unique stories, as you know, but I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the clinical mental health counseling field.
Absolutely. I was born to be a helper and I was born to be a teacher. So that's pretty much the bottom line. I think probably the events that prompted me to select this field, starting way back as a teenager, I had a really good friend who went through a major depressive episode and was suicidal. And I remember being 16 years old and just really wanting to be able to help. And I think it was at that time, also working with a wonderful teacher that we had to support her. It was at that time that I believe I made the decision that I was going to either be a counselor, psychologist, or a teacher. And then in my undergraduate program, I chose psychology. I started as an elementary education major, then switched to psychology, and it just took off from there.
It almost sounds like what I'm hearing is this natural awareness of empathy, that you must have had some understanding that you could have an impact on people who were struggling so much with mental health issues. Where did that knowledge come from?
I think it's just sort of innate in me. I've always been able to see people in their deeper selves, and I've also been able to see past some of the more difficult things that people present in their personalities or their behaviors. I've been able to see past that or through that into the more beautiful aspects of who they are. I also had just the amazing benefit and privilege of having a parent, my mother, who is a social worker, just very compassionate. And so I think she passed along those qualities to me.
So how long have you been a clinician now, and how long have you been a counselor educator?
Wow, I think 20 years as a counselor. I know it doesn't even seem possible. And full-time counselor educator, I'm just finishing up my 17th year.
That's remarkable. In a field in which so many clinicians burn out, what do you think has kept you so, not just engaged, but I watch you teach and I see the way you talk about mental health and joy just oozes from you. So what has kept you away from that burnout pool?
Wow, well, I don't think we have enough time for me in this interview to talk about burnout and what I think about burnout, but essentially I had my first bout of real severe burnout at the age of 24 when I was a social worker. And it was at that time I was so burned out, I thought, I'm just going to go get my MBA and make a lot of money. Like, I'm not doing this work. I'm not cut out for it. It's too hard. And like I said, I was born to be a counselor. So through a series of events, I was pulled back into the counseling profession. So very early in this work, I had to figure it out. What burnout is, what wellness truly is, how to set boundaries. And I ended up writing my doctoral dissertation about occupational burnout, which helped. It didn't prevent me from seasons of burnout along the way in the last 15, 20 years, but I've learned how to manage them. And, and I wouldn't say I have the absolute solution, but I've done a lot of study around burnout from a very multidisciplinary perspective, from a spiritual perspective, an existential perspective, a research perspective. And it's actually a topic that I'm very passionate about studying and helping people through and supporting them through and teaching students.
You led right into my next question. So we were going to ask you whether you have a population of interest and a specialty area of interest in practice.
Well, I've always specialized in working with adults. I have worked with children, but adults really are where I thrive. And I also am very passionate about humans being the very best they can be. So whether you call that potential or multi-potentiality, performance counseling, energetic life force, learning how to channel that energy, that's what I'm very passionate about studying and helping people discover and engage in their own life.
You've made a lot of that study, that research, really useful to other people. You've published a blog recently, you've published texts, you've been published in a number of scholarly journals. Can you talk about what you've been publishing and how important that writing process is?
Well, I'm a writer too, as well as a teacher and a counselor. So I write every day, and sometimes that writing is academic. Sometimes it's personal, such as like fiction work. I did recently publish my blog, which is, I wouldn't necessarily call it academic work per se. I label it more psycho-spiritual. It's very integrative, and I love writing that, and I will always engage in writing in some way. I think writing and producing to the body of knowledge is so important for us, not just as faculty, but us as counselors, to not just be absorbers of knowledge and information, but also absorbers and then creators or co-creators of knowledge and information. That's what makes our field strong. That's what makes our field grow. That's what makes our field evolve. And I am so passionate and so excited to be a part of that.
How do you engage students in that process? That's always the challenge, right? We want them to adopt the professional counseling identity, to get engaged in research and publication. But underlying that is just what you mentioned, this idea that from what they're reading, they could add to it with their own creative thinking and do so in a really scholarly way. So how would you do that with students?
I have a very firm belief that students should never work for me as their teacher. Students should work for them as the learner. So whatever I can do, I see myself as a learning facilitator. So I will create a course or teach concepts in a course that they need to know as per accreditation standards, but I will challenge them to take it one step further and make it relevant for their own life and for their own practice. When students can become passionate about something that is meaningful to them, I never have to get on their case to write, to learn, to co-create, because they just naturally do it because they find that passion and that joy in their own work, and then they do really great things.
One of the compliments, because we have gotten to work together at a different university, one of the compliments I always heard about you from students is that you have a way of engaging a student's passion in a way that gets them even more engaged in courses. Is that just another natural gift? Is that something you learned how to do as an educator? And if so, share the trick. Like, how does that?
Wow, that's a high compliment. That's really a beautiful compliment. I think that students need to see me first as being passionate and engaged in my work. And when they see that model, they see it's possible for them. So I don't know if it's a natural gift or skill. I think it's just that I love my work and I could never do anything else. And I would even ask an incoming student if they're applying for this program, can you do any other kind of work? Because if the answer is yes, maybe you should look at another grad program. And not that I'm trying to push you out of this one. I just feel strongly like when it comes down to it, at your core, like, what is the thing that you have to do, that you're compelled to do? And do that because that's what your purpose is. That's where your passion comes from. That's where you're going to find your most meaning and deepest joy in your work.
You mentioned a little earlier in one of your responses the accreditation standards, and you are coming into our program in the midst of our self-study process. You have been through this work at more than one university. Why are you willing to step in right in the middle of all of this work?
I've always had sort of an entrepreneurial kind of streak in me as well. I relish the idea of stepping into a program that's developing and evolving and helping be a part of that journey. I feel like I have really good skills to support the self-study, and I'm really excited to be part of something that's new and taking off, and the idea of helping to form that just really excites me.
We are going to utilize all of that knowledge and skill set as we keep working on this process, that's for sure. One of the things that we talked about, even in your interview process, is the university's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we know that across the United States, the counseling profession is not as colorful or diverse as we would like it to be. And so we feel a very strong responsibility in the clinical mental health counseling program, but even at the larger university, to create a program that is equitable and inclusive and a safe environment for all types of people. How would you emphasize that as an instructor here? What can you do to help us promote these ideas?
One of the appeals, the strong appeals for me taking this job at UWS is the diversity of students. I am thrilled at the idea of having a student who is living and working in inner city Washington, D.C., to Sydney, Australia, to rural Alabama. I just think that just makes the classroom environment so rich, and I'm so excited about that. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just important in the counseling profession, it is the cornerstone of the counseling profession. And I try to weave conversations, concepts, case studies, challenges, and successes into my coursework, whether it's there in the textbook or the content or not, to always ask the questions, to always ask my students to be more open, to ask them to examine something a little more critically, to challenge them to think about things that are hard for them, whether it's issues related to race or sexual orientation or religion or any other way of identifying or experiencing the world. It's so incredibly important to what we do.
You and I are teaching right now 2 different sections of psychopathology. And as you know, a recent assignment presented a case study of a Black woman who was mandated to counseling in order to receive the type of medical care she needed because of significant pain issues. And in your discussion about that case study with students, you really highlighted the value of believing the client's experience, that having come from a place of poverty, having been relied on to provide care for a family at an early age, having potentially lack of access to medical and mental health care previously, are all valid reasons to be in need of medical care. And you really challenge students to think differently about that. Where does that knowledge and passion come from in you?
Just being a human who has had my own pain, and it's my own, it's not the pain of others, but understanding that we as human beings share in a collective experience of pain, humanity. We all have ways of identifying. And for me to look at my client as a clinical case or a diagnosis or any other way that identifies that individual as something less than being human it's so incongruent with who I am as a person and who I am as a counselor. And I want to impart that to my students, that this work that we do is sacred. It is literally sacred. These are the lives and the experiences and the passions in the heart of people that have needs and pain. And what greater honor is it for us to be able to sit with someone, to believe them, to advocate for them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we always take the client's side 100% and believe every single word and do it all their way. It means we have a balance of what we know, what we've been taught, and the wisdom of that, and the skills and training, but also balancing that with the needs of the person that we're working with, and working always in their best interest, to the best of our ability in that moment, to work in the best interest of the client.
I always talk to our students about the importance of holding loosely to our version of truth. Yes. While really honing in on the client's version of truth. And for many people, there's a truth with a capital T. There's one story, and that's the only story there is, and that's not a great fit clinician. Like that, we have to be able to take in all the knowledge and skill sets that we are learning and earning in a program such as this one, and balance that with what it feels like to be the person sitting across from us. And so I've always appreciated the way you approach teaching in that way, where we will challenge students to really be able to hold those things. What you have been in some impressive positions at other universities. What drew you to UWS? Why did you want to come here and be with us?
Well, so much. I have to think about the top, maybe one or two reasons. Number one, the integrative approach. I have always been fascinated by not just the mind-body connection, but the spirit mind-body connection. Spirit meaning it could be spiritual, it could be existential. It's the something greater, the mystery of humanity that I think sometimes gets overlooked in our profession. And I feel like at UWS, there's opportunity to integrate that piece. The body connection, which I think is so, so important to mental health, as far as wellness, exercise, nutrition, just taking care of our physiological state. And then the mental aspect, which is the solid clinical training and counseling modality and theory. So that integrative wellness approach, I think, is so congruent with the counseling profession and so congruent with me. I'm very intrigued and interested in studying spirit, body, mind approaches. So that aspect. And then also, I think UWS is doing something amazing because it's making education accessible for folks all over, not just the United States, but the world, for students who want to get a really innovative degree to better their careers, whether they're using this degree as an adjunct to a healthcare profession or a coaching career, or whether they want to focus specifically on being a clinical mental health counselor. I think there's so many options for students, and what a great opportunity to be able to access education in a very innovative, integrative way. And I am just thrilled to be a part of that.
We're thrilled to have you be part of that. We're so excited. You lead me to our next question. What do you appreciate most about an online education format? What are we doing well? How can we advance that? Lots of questions.
Well, I've been a counselor educator for 17 years, and I think that online education really works. You have to know how to do it well. I think that the tricky part of that is engaging students, but what works about online education is that it's accessible. So that means that we have a larger diversity of students who are choosing to come to class, which only makes the classroom richer. So that accessibility is also a social justice issue. I believe that making education accessible is part of making things fair and equal for our world so that everyone has access to education. I think that In online education, what works about it is that the things that sometimes get really boring in a face-to-face classroom, like reading and lectures, can be very effectively delivered online in an asynchronous format so that students can learn at their own pace or at their own time. And then when we do meet as a class, or we have a discussion forum, or we have a Zoom meeting or some kind of synchronous meeting, we can make that richer through application. So we use case studies or examples or role plays, and that is an effective way to have more of our meeting time in class. And I think students learn really well that way. It just crystallizes it for them. I feel like my students at UWS are doing really well in this format. I'm just impressed over and over at how every week, every Monday morning, I log into the grade book and I'm like, wow, this student really got it. And, it's just working well. And that's really, as an educator, that's exciting for me.
I remember being in the classroom because I had traditional programs, and you're there after work or after taking care of kids, and it's all you can do to stay awake. And you may be fully invested in learning the materials, but you're just not all present. So this idea that students can come at the material at a time that makes sense for them, organize their schedules, really have an understanding about when they're going to shine in terms of their ability to present or take in information is such an advantage. I wish it had been an option when you and I were in school.
I would have, if I had to do it over again 20 plus years ago, I would absolutely choose a program like UWS. No questions about it. It works, and it's so great for adult learners.
That's a compliment. Thank you so much for that. I like that.
Yeah, my master's program I went during the day. I couldn't work at all. I had to quit my job. Thankfully had a partner to support me, and otherwise it just wouldn't have worked. Had to drive, had to commute 45 minutes each way, sit in class during the day, commute home. It's just really hard. And so having accessible education where I can learn at my own schedule with really great faculty and great peers all over the United States or the world is just amazing.
I've sort of exhausted all the questions I had. I wondered if there were things you just wanted to bring to the table, things you wanted to say to our audience or our potential applicants about UWS, about you, about the program, anything?
I'm just excited to meet you. I'm excited to teach you and get to know your story. I'm excited to help you develop a counseling career and to reach your dreams.
I thank you so much for your willingness to do this in an online format. It's so important for our students to see us as people, as human beings. It's one of the reasons my background is filled with family pictures. And even though Erin's is a little blurred out, you can always see her decorating style. We look at your purple wall and I know that's your favorite color. Yeah. We want our students to know who we are, and we want to know our students and really have such a reciprocal influence. And part of your gifting is that personhood that just shines. And that's why we're so excited to have you coming on. So thank you for your willingness to participate today. I really appreciated it.
Sure, thank you.